Okej, ndjes. Neve bashkohemi të gjithë në orën 11. Bën moderimin një kolege ajo në Gjerman edhe në mini panelin ton të parë janë 4 prezantime nga profesorë të Fakultetit Juridik po dhe nga researcherat të tjerë. Pastaj kemi një 10 minutë pushim, kemi një mini panel të dytë për asetet e konfiskuara, ku kemi një nga shoqëria civile dhe po pra prezantimet paraqitura në konferencë dhe më pas unë agent pash që juve vijonit, zoti Karamuço, më duket ju zonja Çukaj. Kështu që ne ju lëm juve fjalën për të vijuar me moderimin e paneleve të tjera.
Kuptoj.
So, Olga, I think that we should wait 1 or 2 minutes until everybody from the first panel joins. Okay.
Great.
Yes.
I'm Olga Ametistova from German Development Corporation, and I will moderate the English-speaking part of today's conference. I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Johannes Ferguson, team leader of the global program Combating Illicit Financial Flows of the German Development Corporation, to welcome the conference participants. Johannes, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga, and a very warm welcome from my side, dear professors, dear colleagues, and dear guests. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Financial Crimes, Money Laundering, and National Security Conference, co-organized by the Faculty of Law at the University of Tirana and our GIZ Global Program for Combating Illicit Financial Flows. It's a great honor to welcome you today and to open this event. This event is of great significance for us. We are very proud to support an initiative where the topic of illicit financial flows would be a focus of analysis and research by the academic community. It's a process we believe is very important for better understanding of the issue and creating more effective public awareness and understanding on combating IFFs. In a broader sense, illicit financial flows encompasses a multitude of activities that can be undertaken by an individual or a group of individuals, ranging from money laundering to tax evasion to abusing trade channels, sharing the same trait of exploiting the flaws in the global financial system and causing damage to national economies and their rule of law. Stopping this process includes a variety of actors, both of the national and international level, varying from the local civil society organization to the supranational bodies such as the FITF, the Financial Action Task Force, all working together to strengthen the framework that prevents, locates, and recovers these assets that are often gained in an illegal manner. In our view, bringing academia and professionals from different backgrounds enriches the discussion, and analysis of IFFs and you can only improve the methodological and contextual understanding of the issue, helping authorities and international organizations to adjust their approach to the problem. Our collaboration with the University of Tirana has just started, and we will continue to provide our support for developing and strengthening the capacities in the field of illicit financial flows. Thank you so much, and we are looking very much forward to the presentations today, fruitful discussions, an overall successful conference, and our future collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Dear colleagues, before we move on to the first panel discussion, please allow me to remind you on the role of visual communication here at the conference, more precisely on the procedure and technical side of our panels. If you are not a speaker of this session, kindly mute your microphone and switch off your camera. This enables us to focus on the speakers and ensure better connection for all. If you forget it, we will probably mute you to avoid distractions, so don't be confused. Secondly, if you want to ask a question during the question and answer session at the end of this panel, please, you could first write your question in the chat. You can also raise a hand with a hand button, and the request of moderator, you then unmute yourself and contribute. My colleague Anton Bunia will help me in gathering chats, contributions, and leading the discussion. And now, allow me to open the first panel, the panel on money laundering, and introduce the first speaker with the topic of challenges on fighting cash activity for money laundering in Albania, Professor Ervin Caramuço. Professor Caramucha is a lawyer with 20 years of experience in Albanian public institutions, such as parliamentary ombudsman, team leader of Transparency International Albania, legal advisor of President of Republic for Anti-Corruption and Organized Crime, legal consultant of State High Auditor and Anti-Corruption Procedures. He is full-time lecturer in Criminal Department in Tirana State University. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the support that you have done already and the ongoing support we are waiting, in the upcoming events. Today we are facing new challenges, and one of them is fighting cash activity money laundering in Albania. It's one of the pandemics in our country. Despite the problems that we have with COVID-19, we have also the problem of money laundering because we are initially at the procedure of a new electoral campaign coming up on April. So the money laundering activity will be faster a little bit, because it's a custom in our country that before this event will take place, we have this kind of illicit flows of illegal money coming up. The Republic of Albania continues to be the high-risk country in money laundering activities. This situation reporting during all these years with a great concern by international organizations in foreign countries, which repeatedly emphasize the deterioration of this illegal activity. Despite that, Albania has made a relevant effort to adopt and improve national anti-money laundering legislation and set up specialized institutions to identify, track, and denounce the illegal activity in this field. This paper aims to analyze shortly the current situation and to point out the challenges that Albania is facing to combat this illegal activity. Just a short remark about the history in the past. After the 90s, with the beginning of establishing democratic institution in Albania, special impetus took part in the field of circulation of money and incomes. During the first year, other new law enforcement institutions were established, and they were mainly focused on the fight against financial crimes. we have to be focused a little bit during the years 95 to 97, where was the first and very serious challenge that our country would face in the field of financial crimes was the pyramid, or as you called Ponzi schemes. And this was the activity was the first case in which massively an uncontrolled domestic or foreign organized criminal organization group had the opportunity through the pyramid schemes to launder a large amount of cash, receiving not only the percentage due to the deposit, but also by subsequently transferring the regular system to the legal private accounts and the bank accounts. Following the 97 riots caused by this illegal schemes, Albania took a serious measure to prevent such activity in the future. And so we have a very large amount of legal framework inputs since then. In 2000 and then in 2008, we have two new money laundering legislation in our domestic legislation. And then during 2006, we have ratified the Council of Europe Convention of the Prevention of money laundering and such activities, seizure and confiscation and so on. To jump a little bit because it's too much volume to pass over to the very short time, 10 minutes, as you mentioned already. Current situation, we reported for Albania. I have consulted FATF and Manivale, of course, reports and follow-up reports, because there are two separate reports, a kind of reports which Albania has to face and to implement. Recommendation have been implemented, but we have had a lot of bad situation, lacking of procedures, and lacking of political will to implement such recommendation. And of course, I have consulted even the U.S. is another reference in my paper, U.S. Department of State Money Laundering Assessment, where Albania has been categorized by the U.S. Department as a country as a primary concern in respect of money laundering and financial crime. This was very serious during 2019, 2020. According to them, Albania remains vulnerable to money laundering due to corruption, organized crime network, and weak legal and government institution. The country has a large cash economy and informal sector, which significant remittances from abroad. So this causes a very high risk for our country in order to reduce such illegal activity of cash flow, illicit cash flow monies in our market. So I will have to go immediately to the current criminal activities, as I have mentioned this in my paper. We have three, as we already identified, and of course we are giving this even to the students in our university. The three main activities of cash money laundering, cash illicit flow, is the placement at the beginning, and then layering, and the integration or extraction. For the placement, we have had a lot of criminal records from Albanian citizens abroad or domestically, such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, corruption, bribes, illegal gambling, and other organized crime activities. These have been mentioned in a lot of reports, international reports, or foreign states for their national security matters, and we have registered, and then we have put it in this paper in order to make clear that what was the situation about the the first stage, I mean the placement, and then layering. I mean, where this money goes, we, as the Department of State mentioned in the above report, was that we have a very huge percentage of informal economy. So it's very easy for the owners to, I mean, who is dealing with the trade or market activity to pay informal workers, and this money goes nowhere to be declared. And as I mentioned before, for the election is a secret vote buying. We have this problem since 2000. And what is the motto for this? You have to remember during 2019, the Bild magazine, who discovered and then published a lot of audio recorder about the politicians and high rank police officers in our country who were having this criminal activity. So the motto was "Make money to buy power." And this motto is still a very put at risk all the system, not only the electoral campaign and but the whole system then. And then layering, it's about offshore banks. We don't have yet any specialized or a mechanism who can discover. And I mean, this is difficult all over the Europe and beyond that, for the offshore banks information and transparency. And then what we're layering was a small amounts of transfers through the banks, through other credit institutions such as West Union or other institutions, and physically they are, as was an investigation during 2018 about a used car coming from abroad in Albania, but with hidden money from organized crime who had been transferred in our country via road. I mean, this was the unexpected for them time. So we have now to wait and control, mostly at the borders. I mean, even with the airplanes from the airports, from the borders, and so this is much more difficult now to have. I have heard from the information which I put even in the paper, that we don't have yet a cash canine, a cash dog at the border. So it's absent now. And this is, I mean, we don't have other equipments in order to track those caches at the border. And then building, construction, it's another problem, because the predators are going to ask the permission for building, but without giving them the source of their money or for investment somehow. So they are asking for loan at the banks, or they are asking the future buyers to buy preliminary sums in order to start the activity. And so they are putting then the cash. So when they are going to sell the building or the apartments, they have to profit even from their illegal flows, monies. So another problem that has been raised even by Moneyvale activity reports was only the public notary activity in our country. It was very unique one, and maybe it is at risk because you can hide the illicit flows money during their activity. And of course, at the end, shops, another trade activity, fake declaration of revenues, and so on. At the integration, at the third part, is the fake loans that never paid. So bank can give you fake loans, you never pay that, and of course you can declare that as very legitimate. So we can identify, even share fake dividends by the companies or individual bank accounts, or transferring to other bank accounts in order to lose tracks during these transactions. and then establish regular activity to hide evidence. You know, they are doing this at the end of the first sum. But if they are having several sums of cash illicit flows, they have to deal with new companies or activities, regular activities, in order to hide the evidence. Of course, the taxation and revenue amnesty was at a high risk by public administrative decisions. We have cancelled the last initiative by the government, but these amnesties are very, very dangerous for the whole market in order to legalize this flow illicit monies. And then joint venture activities. Of course, you can identify that somehow the informal activities, criminal activities, can be joined to another formal activities in order to lose track, of course. Or during the individual bank accounts coming from illegal activities, you can buy bonds, bank bonds, or company shares, or you can be involved in the process of privatization of such state assets. And then this is a new challenge for our country is activity of public and private fraternity schemes. When the private and the public interests have been joined, the private can give money or the investment at the beginning, and then there is a risk that during this procedure you can put also the illicit flows monies, and of course this is at high risk and had been reported even at the prosecutor office in such cases.
Mr. Professor, we have unfortunately not so much time. So
yes, at the conclusions, I was ready. Great. So the conclusions of this paper is lack of activity, monitoring cross borders, lack of proactive activity of prosecutor office, absence of specialized law enforcement agencies for combating money laundering, and lack of high-rank politician investigations over the money laundering activity, lack of particular academic curricula to train specialized staff in money laundering combat, and then lack of financial source, transparency and construction companies, lack of political institution will to investigate political electoral campaign sponsors, and at the end, lack of periodical analyze the real effect of the market by artificial money flows generated by illegal activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Caramucha, for this great overview of the legal framework and of dynamic and of the situation, and very case-based, very impressive and comprehensive, and also very clear. I hope we will, in the end, in the discussion, probably have the possibility to look what are the solutions for all the problems you listed. Now, I'm happy to introduce Mr. Spiro Pacho with his contribution on a cashless society as a solution for money laundering in the age of the global pandemic. I absolutely agree with Professor Caramucci. We have here two pandemics, and Mr. Pacho will speak about the COVID pandemic and their challenges and their influences on cashless possibilities and cashless solution. Dr. Pacho is currently the Director of Curricula and Quality Standards at University of Durrës. He conducted various trainings inside and outside the country as in public and private institutions, and he is a researcher in topics such as constitutional law, EU and US institutions, prevention of money laundering and terrorism financing, migration issues, theoretical issues on governance system, and he's also author of several books. Mr. Pacho, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will try to conclude in 10 minutes. My article is more theoretical than Professor Ervin's one. Normally, is a proposal for a future solution to money laundering. If we analyze money laundering as a problem of society, it begins with the necessity to get a clear way for the money that we own. For example, the first laws against money laundering begin in the United States during the period between the two world wars, because alcohol was prohibited and the organized crime used alcohol as a source for income. Today, we are facing the global pandemic of COVID, and this has stimulated some countries to achieve the goal of cashless society. The biggest country in the world, China, that is one party state, is the strongest proponent of this solution. What is a cashless society? A cashless society is a society when people don't own banknotes and coins, but they have a digital currency that the name of the currency will be maybe the same of the name of the paper money, but this money is not touchable, is something electronical, digital. Why this solution, why cashless society will be a solution to money laundering? First of all the transaction of digital money is recorded. So you can't exchange money without recording the transaction. Second is that in this moment that we are talking, elements of cashless society are being used against the state, against the society, in the form of cryptocurrency. The case of Bitcoin is the most famous. Only this year, the last year, in Albania have been used nearly 17 million euro of Bitcoin. Someone, physical persons, have made transaction up to $17 million of Ethereum, that is another cryptocurrency. We can check the borders for traffic of money, or for we can check accounts in the banks for money laundering, but we can check cryptocurrency because someone own a code and he have his digital money in that account and can exchange it with a simple phone or with a simple email, fake email account. Society is transforming itself, and we have to transform too. The case of China isn't the best example that we can say. Is China now have nearly 81% of transaction in cashless form, not only digital currency, but also using options like Easy Pay or PayPal and other accounts that use real money, not cryptocurrency. The case of Sweden is something more understandable for the Albanians, because it's a free society that have transformed itself to a cashless society. In Sweden, last year, nearly 82% of all transactions was made cashless. Most of the facility in the capital, in Stockholm, from cafe to bars to restaurants to store, electronic store, all don't accept any more coins or papers. They have access only to credit cards. That now every citizen of Sweden, 95%, if we want to be correct, own a credit card and use it for nearly every transaction. Another case that have been described in the paper is the Singapore case that in 2001 we can say that is the first money-free country in the world, because they have no more cash money but have transacted to the digital currency. What we propose is that this transaction have to be made by a government institution. Currently, the only state in the world that use a cryptocurrency, that use a digital currency as an official currency, is the Republic of Venezuela, that is using it as a weapon to protect itself from inflation. But in 10 minutes we can't explain everything, but considering the small population of Albania, the concentration of a good part of the population in the cities, the fast implementation of new technologies in our country, I think that in a period of 5 years, we can implement in Albania a cashless society. The most important part of this idea is that money laundering with a cashless society will be practically impossible. The first reason is that every transaction from the beginning to the end is recorded, is in the disposition of the state authority that will manage the system. We will lower the cost of transaction of money, deposit, the cost of storing money for a big company, and the
Mr. Pacho, I presume we have some...
It's okay?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Please continue. And you have about 2-3 minutes more.
Okay, I'm concluding. The most important thing is that the risk of implementing a cashless society is the question of the issue of privacy, because in a cashless society, all our spendings, what we buy, what we sell will be registered and will be stored forever. The question of the issue of privacy have been regulated in Sweden, that is a democratic country with a high development, if we can say, have been resolved by the creation of a specific institutional body created by the Parliament of Sweden, with the duty to protect the privacy of the person and check only the data that can be considered suspect. For example, transactions over 10,000 euro. Or like in Albania, we have this in our bank system. The focus of the paper is the possibility of implementing this idea in Albania, and as a conclusion, we think that is possible to implement in Albania, considering also a small study made by the Bank of Albania about the questions that have been discussed in the article. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Pacho, for this really, really interesting in-depth insights into the question and problem of cashless society and virtual currencies. Probably we could later discuss also which implications the cashless society could have and which challenges it could have regarding the transnational view on the things, for example, for the transactions between the national states and of possibility to trace and to recover them. But it is it would be very interesting to discuss it later. Now I'm glad to introduce Mr. Klaus Jadju with his contribution, this time on the German experience with AML regulation and lessons learned for Albania. Klaus is compliance officer at auditing company Vistra in Germany and is based in Frankfurt. He is responsible for all kinds of compliance AML related topics. Before joining Vistra, Klaus was part of the compliance team of Silicon Valley Bank in Frankfurt as well. He helped with the first assessment of all AML regulations applicable for the bank. Klaus studied at the University of Tirana and the University of Hanover and completed an exchange semester at the University of Lisbon. So Klaus, the floor is yours. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I would try to share my presentation. I've prepared a few slides for you, just in short. It should work now.
It works, we can see it.
Okay, perfectly. So, great. Just to give you a bit of overview of the German market. So thank you at first for inviting me. I would go back now to a little bit of practice and not hold you up with theory. I would just be concrete to tell you like what's affecting the German market in phases of anti-money laundering and related activities as well. I have organized the paper according to the agenda with a short introduction of anti-money laundering. How is it seen in Germany? How is it in compared to Albania? And what are the biggest concerns in Germany? Then the important processes in combating money laundering and financial crime. So I'm working in the financial industry. Before I was in a bank, now I'm in a financial services firm. What are our processes and what do we emphasize in combating money laundering, and what is the main aspect as a lesson also for maybe for German for Albanian banks and also for Albanian financial services, because I see a few lacks there also in the legislation, as Professor Caramuço also mentioned, but also in the practice. Then what are the consequences of non-compliance with anti-money laundering procedures and financial crime? I will give a full overview of what we are experiencing at our firm, and also effects in the financial industry in Germany. The last point will be also concluding a few final remarks also for the Albanian institutions, and also maybe for the new legislation that will come. So. Yeah, it was mentioned. So money laundering is clear. It's the definition is applicable everywhere, and it's the same. Getting criminal activity money and putting them in a clean economy in order to recycle them. So it was also mentioned that in Albania there are many money laundering problems, and in Albania it's also money laundering in a practical way. We see it, money laundering in this aspect. So drug money, criminal money, is coming to Albania. It's going into the economy through building, through construction, through different kinds of businesses that are just registered but don't do anything. In Germany, it's a bit different. So it's a bit more complex. We don't have in Germany such easy money laundering. Let's say it's. Figuratively speaking, here it's more complex. We see structures including offshore companies, offshore banks, and also shell companies, which exist only in paper. So there are different schemes using small banks, let's say from small islands, which nobody knows, Seychelles, Cayman Islands, and etc. And the money laundering, that's what I wanted to define here. Money laundering is not only connected to pure and hard criminal activities. So in Germany, we see money laundering also connected to tax evasion. So we have people that try tax evasion and want to put that money coming from tax evasions still in the economy, and also trying to clean it, let's say. But it's still a problem, even though in Germany there are different laws, regulations, there are audits, regulatory audits, and very strict rules. It's still a big problem, and I will come up in the next slide in the important processes in combating money laundering. So what is the focus of these regulators in order to just try to prevent it? Because preventing it 100% it's difficult, but the focus remains in the first processes. Let's say we heard also from Professor Caramuço that the cash money in Albania is going directly to the buildings, also to construction, also to public tenders. This is difficult in Germany because there are strict laws, there are strict regulations, and also the cash money it's very difficult to be included in the banking system again. So if you have cash, it's very difficult to put it in. So the main help on this is the KYC process. So each bank or each company who is opening a bank account is going through this KYC process. So this is the first process on opening the account, and there is the whole source of money done. So the bank tries to see where did this money come from, and does then a full due diligence. We call it due diligence here because you see all the main aspects. I can remember a few months or maybe months ago, I heard in Albania there was a big scandal with a company coming from Delaware, which was getting a public tender, and this company was unknown and nobody knew the owners. So this doesn't happen here, and we do our best to get to know the owners before putting the company in the system. So we have also it doesn't mean that offshore structures are always bad. Offshore structures are used mainly from private equity funds, from investment funds, because they have tax benefits. But still, when we have them, it's a high alert. So for me as an anti-money laundering officer here, when I see an offshore structure, it's directly a red flag, and we just need to go deeper. So when we have a company of Delaware, or when we have a company from Jersey or Seychelles, it doesn't mean it's no go, but it's still we have to go and get deeper and to see who are the real owners, because then you have lost. I would emphasize here, as I also mentioned, transparency register. This is a new register in Germany. The last couple of years it was in place. I would also recommend it maybe for Albania, also for the Albanian legislation, because it's a register where all the companies should register their ultimate beneficial owners. So if you in Germany want to open a business or want to be registered in a bank with a bank account, you don't have to be only in the trade register. It's like Çerekja in Albania, but you have to be also in the transparency register, where you register your owners. So all the owners are registered there, and they are not disclosed. Of course, they are only for the state. But this is a good opportunity to have, let's say, for each company the owners, because in Albania you register only the shareholders, and in the end the shareholder can be a foreign company. You don't know who stays, who is the ultimate beneficial of that money. So this would be a good lesson. just to give you a short overview of the consequences. So to keep it short, because I think the minutes are going, it's clear. The consequences of non-compliance are clear for each company. The biggest damage, I would say, for my perspective, is the reputational one. In Germany, even though the financial market in Frankfurt or also in other European countries, reputation. Sorry. I heard something. Anyway, the reputational damage would be from my perspective the biggest challenge, because even though it's a big market, still networking works like in a small country. If you get a shot for anti-money laundering in a figuratively speaking way, you get the reputational damage that you will carry for long, and it's very bad for you in the financial ecosystem, let's say. But also a liability, and also losing a license, and these are all happening, and they are normal, let's say, if you are included in the money laundering. So as I mentioned, even just to conclude, as I mentioned, even in Germany, and also with this sophisticated and very strict laws, there are still very big scandals, and I mean big, huge, in millions or billions. We have a few banks. Last was Deutsche Bank, and we have also Deutsche Bank is one of the biggest banks in Germany, and it was included in a few money laundering scandals. We have also a few banks with very strict structures and big scandals that are affecting the financial ecosystem here. Nevertheless, the regulators do their best. So we have our BaFin regulator here, and also the Bundesbank, who try with their audits to see and check the banks. But still, in the end of the day, it's if the bank or if the financial system companies do not have the relevant procedures, as I mentioned above, knowing the clients, knowing the money, where the money is coming from, it's very difficult to track, and also difficult for the regulator. So everywhere it's happening, we just have to be aware, and we have to see to get our best from this system as systems, and also implement them to Albania.
Thank you, Klaus. Also for this very plastic, very expressive, and also case-based presentation, and very Germany-friendly, I would say, because we are struggling in Germany with some problems in anti-money laundering regulation and praxis, and I think one issue is beneficial ownership and transparency register, and another is, for example, also the role of supervisory institution like BaFin. I think we also could include it in the later discussion. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Fiorida Balauri, speaking on declaration of income and assets as an important mechanisms in the prevention of money laundering in case of Albania. Dr. Balauri completed her doctoral studies in criminal law and received the scientific degree PhD in criminal science in the Faculty of Law in University of Tirana. She was more than 12 years working in public administration at the High Inspectorate of Declaration and Control of Assets as Director of Cabinet and Director of the Legal Department and Relations with Responsible Authorities. She worked at the General Prosecutor's Office in the position of Director of Cabinet. Since 2015, she's a lecturer in Criminal Law Department at the Faculty of Law of University of Tirana. And she's also certified trainer for anti-corruption and good governance. You're very welcome, Fiorida.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to be part of this conference, and especially part of this panel. So I have prepared even some slides. Just a moment.
We can see it. Very good.
You can see it?
Yeah. We could see it.
Okay.
Now it disappeared.
I'll try again. Sorry, just a moment.
Yes, we have it.
Yes.
Exactly. Go on.
Okay. So I don't know, it doesn't work. It is shared. Sorry, it is shared.
Yes, it is shared.
Okay.
We also can share it from our side if necessary, if it doesn't work. But hopefully it does. So we can see the slide number 1.
Slide number 1. Okay. You can see the slide number 1?
Yes. So probably we could try to share it from our side.
Okay.
Anton?
The purpose of this paper is Albania has taken important steps in the prevention and fight against money laundering, both in legislative planning and in the establishment of a responsible institution in this field. The paper aims analyzing the problems facing our country today in terms of law and practice in identifying, preventing and prosecuting money laundering cases. Some new mechanisms and instruments will also be addressed, such as the declaration of income and assets for all the citizens, which can significantly affect both the preventive plan, but also the investigation and criminal proceedings of money laundering cases. We have dealt with some conclusions on the findings, and some new suggestions will be part finally in the conclusion. Since October 2020, Albania is under increased monitoring in terms of meeting the FATF recommendations. So Albania needs to do an in-depth analysis for the risk of money laundering and to strengthen institutional coordination and cooperation. It should also improve the timely handling requests for mutual legal assistance and investigation in financing and preventing criminal activity in the economy. According to Moneyval's 5th round report, corruption is a major risk for money laundering in Albania, and often it is linked with organization with criminal activity. So we have been focused in the 6 points of the FATF public statement dated in October 2020, where it has been identified some strategic deficiency for Albania. Mostly of them are linked with financial flows and problems in the economy, or mostly of them are linked even with the financial investigation and the work of law enforcement agencies. Albania have had some legal improvements in the field of money laundering from, and we have analyzed only the period 2019 and 2020. Law number 33 of 2019, it have been some new changes. But we are concentrated in 2 new laws. One of the Central Register of Bank Accounts, the new law that is approved in 2020, and another law that is 112 of 2020 on the Register of Beneficiary Owners. So this law, which is newly adopted, has regulated the procedure for registration and retention of registered data of beneficiary owners. It is a very important law because we have this complete information about the beneficiary owners. But in practical term and in the implementation, it will take time for its effect to be fully realized. What we find in analyzing this law is the fact that the legislator has provided a deadline of 30 calendar days for the registration of data of the beneficiary owner. In our estimation, this is a relatively long term and that it does not justify today's technological development. During this period, the entity is required to report may be several changes in the ownership of the company beneficiaries and financial transactions which will potentially will be difficult or impossible to be identified. On the other hand, we have identified and we have taken in consideration in our analysis some of the priority actions in the recommendation of Moneyval in the 5th round module evaluation report. That are sure linked with directly with financial investigation and economical financial flow. It's okay? Yeah. What is important to analyze is the fact that in the immediate outcome, number 7 of the Moneyval recommendation, it is said that Albania should ensure that parallel financial investigation are launched in all cases of serious proceeding generating crimes with a view of detecting related money laundering cases. But regarding this implementation of this recommendation, in the General Prosecutor Office report of 2019, it stated that not in every time, not in every case, parallel investigation have been involved, because they have identified the 2 main problems. One is the interinstitutional cooperation with agencies involved in law enforcement and anti-mafia law, and there is insufficient capacity to conduct investigation for the detention, identification, and seizures of assets resulting from the activity of organized crime. Sorry.
We can see everything. All good.
Okay, practice.
To interrupt, I'm sharing the screen for you so everybody can see your presentation, and I'm following you.
Okay. Practice has shown that one of the main obstacles for the prosecution office or law agencies in anti-mafia law is the fact that the prosecutor will have to collect information through official correspondence. So for every proof about assets, personal incomes, liabilities, credit banks, etc., the prosecutor have to send an official letter to the institution and have it back officially. So these procedures are time-consuming and in most cases are unsuccessful due to the lack of a database and the history data of creating income and assets. So a chronological way of wealth creations for all the citizens. So prosecution actually don't have direct access in the main registers, public registers on immovable property, Albanian notary register, belief service, and all the other registers that are connected with tax office and custom registers. So the other slide, thank you, Adida. The fight against money laundering and terrorism financing, we analyze that cannot be effective if these institutions don't have in real time or direct access in data that are linked directly with financial, economic, and ownership in immovable properties, bank accounts, and all other types of personal incomes. For all citizens, whenever this is an official, a self-employed person, unemployed, or retired citizen. We actually have the declaration of assets for the public officials, that in total there are only 2,700 persons. So this is the number of the officials that today declares their assets and their income in the High Inspectorate and Declaration of Assets. Actually, you don't have any information in a database because there are informations, but they're spread in different institutions. So, the other slide. Okay. In the legislative plan, Albania has taken important measures to prevent money laundering in various areas of the economy. In all transactions, especially those with high risks, for example, about investment in companies, in property, immovable, and so on, it is required by law to declare the legal source of the income for the transactions. But, thus the obligation to control the source, there are no specialized structures to control the legal source of these transactions, especially in the main institution like State Cadastre Agency, the National Center of Business, and so on. So most of the time, the procedures is considered completed only upon submission of several documents without any verification. And the problem in practice lies for the lack of specialized bodies and officials to deal with this information. On the other hand, I don't know why the system does not respond for the presentation. Okay, since 2003, in Albania has approved the law of declaration and assets, and this has a good impact on increasing the accountability of public officials. Sorry. The slides are disconnected, but it's okay. Since 2003, we have the law of declaration of assets that has a very good impact on the prevention of corruption, and especially in the transparency of the assets and of the income of the officials. But, on the other hand, it has been identified other forms of concealment of public official assets using third parties through transferring the unjustified wealth in their name or involving this person in legal relationship or financial transactions. And these problems arises even in the fight against money laundering. The main typologies of money laundering link the efforts of laundering the proceeds of criminal activity with individuals who are not in the state control scheme and who in most cases do not have even sufficient financial resources to carry out those transactions. Albania Tax Office.
Fiorida, unfortunately, we have not so much time.
Okay, so this is the fact. So what we find is that in the analysis that an effective mechanism that can be put in place to achieve the detection and prevention of these cases is establishment of a scheme for the declaration and control of assets and the incomes of every Albanian citizen. So everyone have to declare their property, their incomes, and, for example, bank accounts in the tax office that we have today as a structure. It will not require this to be an establishment of new structures because it can be best accomplished by existing tax office. And in every time, the state, as other models of other state, can use the refundable expenses to declare in order to be more friendly for the citizen and would be more adopted for them. On the other hand, we have analyzed even some statistical data from the prosecutor office, from Ministry of Justice and police state, even with the General Directorate of Anti-Money Laundering, to see where is the problem with the cases, real cases of investigation of money laundering cases. And what we find is the fact that we don't have unified statistical data for all these institutions, and there is a lack of structures and infrastructure in order to develop this statistical data and to have a good performance of the institution. Because in our analysis we find that in reality the performance of the institution is much better of the data that they are mainly find in their report, because you don't have unified statistic. Other way is reported by the prosecutor, in other way it is reported from the General Director of Money Laundering, and in other ways is reported by state police. So in order to have a unified statistical data, it will have great impact. At the end, at the conclusion, we find that the establishment of a scheme for the declaration and control and of assets for all the Albanian citizens will bring a positive impact on the prevention of money laundering, effective application of anti-mafia law, the control for legal incomes, intersection and investment of every citizen, and prevention of anti-corruption for corruption and abuse of power. A new law new law on declaration of assets would not necessarily have financial effect on the state because it can be established from the tax office. So we can easily have the e-Albania platform that has too much information, and it can be used firstly this information in order to proceed with this new scheme. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Fiorida, for this, also very comprehensive. I'm doubling here. Probably you could mute yourself. Thank you for this very comprehensive contribution, also for these references to FATF data on Albania, which is really interesting, and also on actual legislation, and also very forward-looking. So that was the last contribution in this panel. We are a bit out of time, which is not tragic because we have some rooms after the second panel for discussion. So I would propose we would have now questions and answer session, 10 minutes. Then we have a break, and then we'll begin with the second panel. I'm happy to open the questions and answers part of the discussion. With one peculiarity, we do not have chat. That means please only raise your hand and we will discuss orally. Thank you. So may I ask you for contributions? Great. Dritan, your turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank all the speakers for their very comprehensive and professional presentations. If it is possible, I will raise all my questions for all the speakers and give them the opportunity to give the answers. If it's possible to do like that, I will start with Mr. Caramuço. First, in his presentations, he presented some links between the election and the money laundering. Since we think the justice system is mostly independent, do you think this is most a problem of or lack of independency of justice system rather than, let's say, a link between money laundering? Also, another question for him, if it is possible to elaborate further the role of notaries in, let's say, in facilitating money laundering, and about, he talked also about the offshore banks working for many years in anti-money laundering, in the prevention of anti-money laundering institutions. I can say that really offshore banks are not present in Albania, and such consideration, I think it is necessary to further being elaborated, I would say. In regard to Mr. Pacho, I think a cashless economy is good, and it's let's say a further step to prevent money laundering. But from best experiences, I can say that Sweden has had many problems and has passed through enhanced review by the FITF. So, you know, when we speak about the cashless economy, I think we have to take in consideration all the factors that impacted that and the role that cash has in our economy. Of course, we pretend to have a wide use of cash, but in both cases, Sweden and China, one of the biggest economy and one of the biggest cashless economy, hasn't, let's say, result success case. that was about the Mr. Pacho, and I will further go with Mr. Jajiu and his great experience in preventing of money laundering make me surprised in his presentation. I really thank him for that very good presentation. I have here just a comment. In Germany, for example, Deutsche Bank, it's fined in many cases still, let's say, 600 of millions US dollars for lacking on preventive measures or involved in money laundering. In this situation, we have to consider that all the assets of Albanian financial system is about 12 billion euros, or it's equivalent to 107% of GDP. So when we our role in international, let's say, financial system is very limited, and we are a very small economy. And in regards of the preventive measures, since I have been heading the compliance unit at the FIU for more than 12 years, I can say that we compete very well with many countries, EU countries, and I further can say that there is no bank in Albania involved in, let's say, institutional money laundering. So that's a good asset that we have, and Albanian institutions have a lot of access also in financial data, also in the other government, let's say, databases. In regard of the presentation of Mrs. Balauri, I also have one question and one comment. The question is in regard to the access of the prosecution office in different databases. She mentioned central register or stuff like that. I don't know if this is, or if she thinks that this has impacted the investigation or has limited, let's say, their power to investigate money laundering cases. And in regard of declaration of the assets, I think it's a very good idea to have a declaration for all the citizens, like in many other countries. Also, I have been part of the vetting institutions for the justice system, and I can say that in most cases, the prosecutors or judges have been, let's say, fired or haven't passed the vetting process with problems linked to their assets. So the role of the Hitachi, I don't want to, let's say, to make a comment on its work, but I think that the declaration systems has had problems, because if we hadn't had this rate, let's say, in the vetting process, it should, let's say, it should be a very good experience. So that is all from my part, and sorry for taking too much time, and thank you all for this very professional conference.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes, and I'm very happy to hear your questions. And yeah, from my side, please be aware of time. So, Professor Caramucha.
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. You put us on at work again. So my answer is very short, looking the minutes, that for the first issue, I mean, we have a legal framework regarding the financial of political parties, but the problem is that according to the commissioner of Central Election Institution, we already knows that there are a lack of staff who will deal with investigation, and also the independent auditors are not enough for going till the end the investigation regarding the source of financial flows. So, and the prosecutor office in the other part, it's not prepared or trained or have a special structure to deal with. So the answer is we are not clear who is doing what. And since there is an unclear situation, of course, there are a lot of risks that the political parties will be somehow engaged in illicit flows, monies during the electoral campaign. So this is a very huge risk about this this issue. And the second one, regarding you mentioned the, as I remember,
Notaries.
Notaries.
yeah, the notary is a free professional activity, and of course that notary itself, it's they can declare fake activity about the revenues, and that the other part, the notary is the activity when a lot of illicit flows money can be contracted, can be formally writing down at the papers for being registered then. So in both aspects, notary is a very high risk of being part of money laundering. So even at the recommendation of Manivale last year, they recommended that would be some arrangements and some improvements of legislation regarding the public notary activity. Thank you very much.
Pacho, your turn.
Thank you. Regarding the effect that the cashless society will have in money laundering, it's true that we are not China, we are not Sweden, we are not Singapore, none of this country. But we have a young population that is attracted from the new things or new technology. We can make laws and create new organization, institution to prevent money laundering. But the question is that cashless society is not a way to limit money laundering. It will stop totally money laundering, tax evasion, and everything. Why? Because it's the control of the direct control on the money. This doesn't mean that we will not have money. Money will exist, but the way of transaction will not be physical, but will be electronical. Normally, I know that in Albania the implementation is not possible now, or maybe even after 10 years. But I think that cashless society is the future of every country in the world. Is impossible to avoid it. We live in a world with cashless society because there are no trees in the world enough to print the money that exists in digital accounts. Bill Gates have nearly $100 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, all the billionaires, only 1% of their money is printed. They are all numbers, digital numbers in an account. It's true, again, that Albania is far from this destination, but normally my article is only an idea how the actual institution, with the Bank of Albania in the center, can try to implement or give solutions to business, small business, normal cafeteria and restaurants, to try limiting cash and using more credit cards without passing to the final step that is total digital money. Thank you.
Thank you, Spiro. So then, Klaus, your turn.
Yes, at first, thank you for your comments. I agree with the point that can you everybody hear me? because I think that's perfect.
Yes.
I agree with the comment, and I also agree that Deutsche Bank itself has maybe more assets than the whole Albanian GDP and the whole Albanian economy, but still we have also small countries in Europe, as Luxembourg, for example. It's also a very, very small country, but still they have extremely tight regulations for their banks. But just to be clear, the banks in Albania, they are strict. I also have had this experience. So they have strict procedures, strict regulations in place, and policies, everything. The only problematic which I find, or which I see there, is that the banks in Albania are not involved in a huge percentage in the economy. There is a lot of cash circulating from criminal activities, from not clean money, let's say, and that's the main aspect. And it's not only the banks that should implement this kind of procedures. As I mentioned, there are a whole of financial industry companies, also different companies in construction sector, also in IT sector, everywhere, in order to prevent this kind of money jumping in the economy, not only through the banks, but also through other ways. This was the first comment. That I would just put a small sentence regarding the cashless economy. So I'm, as a person, I am totally agreeing with cashless. But living in Germany, Germany is also a bit traditional. In Germany, cash is used mostly. It's very difficult. It's not in comparison to Sweden or Denmark, where everything is online, digital currency, everything with online transactions. But the problem is here, even if you do it like Denmark or Sweden, that's all the money that's circulating is cashless. It's electronical. There is also opportunity to do money laundering. So money laundering is so sophisticated nowadays, so you cannot prevent it 100% with the cashless economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Last but not least, Fiorida. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dritan, for your question and the comment. I believe, and what the analysis of this presentation and this article said, is that the prosecutor office and even the other law enforcement agencies needs to have direct access in the main databases of the state. The main databases, they are public register that have the main information about assets, liquidities, bank accounts, credits, contracts, and so on, and main investments in commercial companies, and so on. One of the main arguments that I can give you in this point is the fact that most of the time, and in practice, dealing with the sending of the official letter from the prosecutor in banks, in institutions, and so on, has revealed the secrecy of investigations. So most of the time, it has been in practice that one official in one institution or in private one has taken a request from the prosecutor office about information for bank accounts, movable property, and so on, about a person, about a suspected person. In 1 minute or in within 24 hours, the person knows everything about that question, that official letter. So this is a main argument that you need as a state to give the main databases and information for the law enforcement agencies. I'm saying about the registers that are today actually formed, and there are disposable for all the institutions, like the listed that I have. So movable and immovable and movable properties, bank accounts. It is good news that in the new law for the bank accounts, the prosecutor office will have direct access, but we don't know when this will be a reality, because this system isn't yet been structured. And but with the other, for the comment that you have, it is true that we have problems in even as citizens. We have an institution of declaration of assets that is created from 2003 that have to control all the judges, prosecutors, politicans, and so on. And we have the vetting process that have dealt with many much problems dealing with property and incomes for this these judges and prosecutors. But the main problem, the main fact, I can say to you that you have different methodologies in controlling in these two processes. So in the vetting process, judges and prosecutors have the obligation, the obligation to prove incomes and assets before 2003. In the time that the informality of Albania was extremely high. And in most of the times, these judges and prosecutors have to prove the incomes and what they have in the time that you didn't have bills enough, or you haven't a tax structure office as we have it today, or as we had it since 2003 and on after the Hidachi has been involved in the process. So there are very problems in this moment, even for the fact that why Hidachi, and this is a good question for everyone, even for the specialists, but even for the citizen, why Hidachi didn't identify these problems in time, and why these have to be from the vetting process. One of the arguments is this. Another thing is the fact that you have different methodologies. The assets control, the control of assets and income, is one of the main 3 points of evaluation for the judges and prosecutor. So it's not the only, the only topics that is evaluating. So I think these are the main problems for this process.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharida. Thank you all for dear participants for your excellent contributions into a very smooth and rich discussion. I would be very happy to say, please continue bilateral discussing in the coffee corner. Unfortunately, it's impossible. Nevertheless, however, it could be possible later. Then I would like to propose to meet again in 6 minutes. That means 12:30, in order to continue our great panel with asset recovery questions. I hope it's okay for you. Great. Then all the best, and in 6 minutes. Okay, dear colleagues, I hope you can hear and see me. Hello again. Great that you are all back. Nice to see you all. And let me go to the topic of asset recovery. We will discuss this. We wanted to discuss this topic from the different point of view, from the point of legal advisory as well as from the perspective of civil society. Now we received a message that Mr. Duhanji, who wanted to contribute to the discussion from the point of third-party interests affected by the sequestration and confiscation, according to the anti-mafia law, unfortunately cannot join to us. That means we will have now a panel only concentrating on the role of civil society, of transparency, accountability in the topic of asset recovery, which is, I think, really good and excellent topic, and not a common topic. I'm from my side working in the topic of asset recovery. That is why it's a special pleasure to moderate this panel. So then let's begin with the contribution of Agostino Camarda and transparency and accountability in asset recovery field. Agostino is founder of CIFAR, Civil Forum for Asset Recovery, a German NGO, and its director. Since 2010, Tino has worked to support civil society worldwide in their work on anti-corruption, migration, and asset recovery. He has published several studies and papers on the topics of asset recovery, illicit financial flows, whistleblowing, and other anti-corruption areas with Transparency International and CIFAR. So, Timo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga, and I would like to thank the University of Tirana also for the kind invitation to this very interesting conference, and of course the GIZ Global Program Combating Illicit Financial Flows as well. Let me just try to share my PowerPoints before I start. I hope you can see it. As always, question mark online, but I assume it's all good.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. So in this brief intervention, I would like to introduce the topic of transparency and accountability in asset recovery, why we think these topics are important, and what is the role of civil society in achieving these. So first of all, I just wanted to start with saying a few words about our organization, CIFAR, Civil Forum for Asset Recovery. As Olga said, we are an NGO founded in 2015 in Berlin, Germany, with the purpose of strengthening the role of civil society in general working on asset recovery. Why? Because we think that civil society and investigative journalists from the two sides of the asset recovery coin, that means the global south, the countries where the assets are originating often, and the global north as asset receiving country, should work together more and better. The same way that we are seeing more and more law enforcement and prosecutors are working more together. Since our foundation, to this purpose, we supported civil society organizations in the global south and the global north to understand this complex topic of asset recovery, providing them training programs on these topics, creating networking opportunities, facilitating and conducting investigations of cross-border corruption cases, and conducting also global campaigns on the relevant topics. On this slide, you can see some examples of our work. In the past few years, we've trained also in collaboration with the GIZ Global Program Combating Illicit Financial Flows, a number of investigative journalists with the production also of cross-border corruption stories. We have created, for example, a database of sanction people on corruption sanctions list in the EU, and many other things, many other research and analysis. Now, one of our drivers of CIFAR has always been that we really think that asset recovery needs to become more transparent and accountable. We are very happy to see that since our foundation in 2015, this topic has become more and more recognized by public authorities, as we can see in this conference. But why do we think that these topics are so important? Now, since asset recovery has existed, I think we all know that it has been a very complex procedure involving different jurisdictions, institutions, complex money flows across countries and regions, and many other challenges. It is clear that asset recovery is a matter carried out essentially by state authorities, such as judiciary, law enforcement, prosecutor, executive branches, anti-corruption agencies, and so on. These institutions have a clear mandate to conduct and coordinate all phases of asset recovery processes, from investigating to ordering freezes and confiscations to negotiating between different countries how assets should be returned and then reused. So it is essentially a state matter, but as we will see in a minute, civil society plays a pretty important role. What I wanted to mention also is that information about ongoing cases, on asset recovery cases, is often very sensitive and needs to remain confidential. And why is this? Because, for example, when there is an investigation ongoing, releasing information on a certain case would likely endanger the success of that investigation. For example, the person that is under investigation could understand what is happening, could hide the proceeds of the crimes that are being investigated. Also, during prosecutions and trials for financial crimes, Often privacy and confidentiality considerations are involved, and these are often even protected by the law. And finally, by its nature, diplomatic negotiations about asset recovery returns between different countries, governments have been conducted behind closed doors, although we do see some change in the past couple of years, and we are happy to see that. Now, we have all these considerations about sensitivity and confidentiality, but on the other side, we also see that the lack of transparency and accountability in asset recovery processes can and have caused several shortcomings. For example, if in almost all cases that we have heard of, the public was not informed about what was happening with these large amounts of money that disappeared and then were being recovered, and this has caused frustration and loss in confidence in public institutions and in the asset recovery process. Second, the lack of oversight, because nobody knew outside institutions what was happening, meant that civil society or other actors could not monitor what was happening with these cases, and this contributed to making these cases not progress, among other reasons, of course. And finally, there is a big risk in our view when it comes to not having information about what happens to the assets once they have returned, and that means that they could either disappear in the public budget without clear information on how it was used, or even in the worst case, they could be stolen again. And we did have examples of this in some countries. So we at CFAR, we don't see transparency and accountability as some abstract theoretical value. We think that they are important for asset recovery in general, because their translation into practice means that everyone benefits from it. And the same way, we see the role of civil society as a constructive and necessary element in the asset recovery process, because they are key, as we will see in a second, that to achieve transparency and accountability. Now, the next question that I want to ask ourselves is, if transparency and accountability are so important, but at the same we have all these considerations about objective legal constraints, about what kind of information can be released, how can we find a balance, and how can we, what kind of information can be released, and how can we make sure that involved institutions are accountable for their actions in asset recovery? These are questions that we asked ourselves a lot in the past few years, and we tried to find an answer and a common ground on which we can work, and this is why we developed the so-called civil society principle for accountable asset return. And I just want to take a few minutes to present these findings, these principles that we developed. Now, these principles have been developed through an 18 months process involving a large number of civil society organizations from across the globe. I would say the key actors in the civil society to work on asset recovery and illicit financial flows were involved in the process. We consider them a minimum framework standards, and they were designed to be supplemented by country and case-specific details by each civil society in each country. They can be applied to international and domestic asset recovery. And if you want to read more, you can follow this link on the screen. Of course, I'm happy to share the presentation after the conference. The principles are divided into 4 sections: transparency, integrity, accountability, and victim restitution. Since this topic of today is transparency and accountability in asset recovery, I wanted just to take a few minutes to talk about these 2 areas of the principles. First of all, we think that the transparency should apply in the whole process of recovering assets, meaning settlements or other kind of agreements such as reconciliation agreements. These should all be conducted with transparency and accountability from the start to the end. Of course, to the extent compatible with the rules on confidentiality of investigations. And this last point, of course, is key to put in practice the principle, because it has to be adapted to each country, legal context, and relevant institutions. Also, we recommend that against this background, and as far as possible, relevant authorities, both domestic and international, including judicial authorities where this is permitted, should provide information and make them publicly accessible, and from the start of the process. Now, more concretely, what kind of information do we ask as civil society to be published, to be publicly available on each asset recovery case? There are different areas. Now, I just wanted to mention the more important ones. For example, the nature, type, and estimated value of the assets that are under investigations and that are seized or confiscated. So the general information about each case, a timeline of the planned steps for the return, so knowing when the return is going to take place. Also, relevant legal frameworks of the relevant jurisdictions, and finally the negotiating frameworks between governments. This should include modalities for asset return and disbursement. And yet, talking about this last part of the asset recovery process, which we, as I was mentioning before, we see as particularly at risk of when transparency is lacking, we see that once the assets are returned, the transparency should include at the minimum an independent tendering process for third-party stakeholders involved in the disbursements of the funds, due diligence on third-party and intermediary actors, and finally, independently audited reports on the disbursement and management of these funds. When it comes to accountability, we think that, of course, making relevant public actors involved in the asset recovery process accountable of their role and their action is equally key as transparency. To achieve this, it's key that anti-corruption, rule of law, and accountability mechanisms are in place to provide oversight of the assets that have been recovered. And this would include, as a minimum, that all recovered assets must be traceable by the general public at all stages, and that among other methods should be developed to separate returned assets from the general state budget and to be placed in a special account or some other independent mechanisms until the assets have been fully disbursed. And we did have some examples of this in the past few years, for example, in Nigeria. And finally, participation of civil society, including the groups representing victims of corruption, should participate in the process. And there should be a monitoring process in place on how the disbursement of funds is being included. Of course, also with the involvement of civil society. And finally, that negotiating agreements, multilateral and bilateral agreements, are made public in a timely and accessible manner. These are our demands as civil society, and I think it is key that these principles are discussed and agreed on with some compromise on a country basis and on a multi-country basis. Of course, events like this one today help us to achieve this. To finish my presentation, I just wanted to talk about the role of civil society and how they should and can contribute to transparency and accountability in asset recovery. We, at our core of our strategy, think that this is a fundamental role, both to prevent corruption to happen again and during asset recovery processes. To give some examples on how civil society is contributing and can contribute more on asset recovery, let's go through them. For example, by identifying and analyzing mechanisms that allow financial crime to take place in the first place, and as such building background information around cases that can be used by law enforcement, and then at the same time identifying and tracing the proceeds of financial crimes across countries, as we've seen increasingly done by investigative journalists. If you think about the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, and many other collaborations. And it has been proved that actually law enforcement has used these information provided by journalists more and more. Participating and contributing to decisions on how the assets should be used once they are returned, including for social programs dedicated to victims of corruption and other needs, and monitoring the transfer of assets, of recovered assets, and finally monitoring how investigations on asset recovery are progressing and how they can be improved. So I think I will stop here. I think my time is up. I will just, I'm very happy that we have another representative of civil society here who can give more concrete examples of the role of civil society. Thank you very much.
Great, Tino. Thank you very much for this very insightful introduction. And, also for the introduction into the asset recovery as such. Which we didn't do in the beginning of this panel. And you're absolutely right. The asset recovery is being considered as a matter of the state agencies, first of all. There is a mutual legal assistance. There are the interagency cooperation, which is really important in order to recover and to return. The really formal processes of confiscation, of enforcement of court judgments, and so on and so on. But, and I'm very thankful for your very deep consideration. The civil society is, the role of civil society is raising, and we can see besides of your insights, we can see for example, the work of ANCA coalition as a part of anti-corruption process on the UN level. And we can see also the role of civil society in the Global Forum of Asset Recovery in 2017. So that is great. That is why we, for example, as German agency, development agency, we are working with the state and with the civil society in the same time. And now, from the theory to the praxis, and I'm very happy to introduce Kristina Voko with the concrete practical examples and experience from Albanian civil society involvement into the asset recovery processes. Kristina Voko is the executive director of the Balkan Investigative Report Network in Albania called BIRN from 2014. She coordinates the network's activities, fundraising, and projects in the office in Tirana. During her professional experience with BIRN, she has been involved in designing and implementing projects and research studies related to journalism, freedom of information, media freedom, open data, and corruption and transparency initiatives. With a background in psychology, Kristina has an extensive experience in quantitative and qualitative research methods by leading many research projects in media and other fields. Kristina, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Olga. You made me blush from the introduction. And thank you especially, Agatina, for setting the background for our presentation. Yes, Agatina explained the importance of civil society, and as part of civil society, because sometimes we, let's say, differentiate civil society from media, but I want to see them as a joint actor. Which aim toward both important aspects, that is transparency and of course accountability in all the steps of the asset recovery. We are going now from theory to practice, and I know that the title of my presentation is Increasing Transparency of Confiscated Assets in Albania. But my presentation will be focused more on challenges in trying to increase transparency of confiscated assets in Albania, because as we know, it's a long process with many challenges ahead. I have to say first that civil society in Albania has, and especially media, has been much more successful in contributing in other spheres of, let's say, anti-corruption actions, on identifying money laundering cases, on identifying abuse of power, but also in cases of asset declarations of both judges and prosecutors, but also officials in Albania. But the role of civil society and media in the asset recovery field has been very limited. We have a very successful experience until now of Partners Albania that I hope are here present with us, which have from almost 3 years now working in the social reuse of the confiscated assets. But what is lacking is the information about all the previous steps that Agatina mentioned, especially on identifying and tracing the assets, on freezing and confiscation, and of course transparency and accountability of investigative process, and of course recovery and returning of such processes. Why the role of both civil society and media has been limited is because there is no data available. So in the last year, we have tried hard to get and to increase transparency over the confiscated assets in Albania in the last decade, which are based on the anti-mafia law, but even lately on the famous Çukaj initiative. And we have encountered many problems, both as journalists, but also as civil society organization. And the first problem is because there are no data available from the police, starting from police, from the prosecutor offices, but also from the courts. Another problem with which journalists are encountered are, of course, lack of data provided by, regarding the court decisions taken on the confiscation of the assets. We are focusing mostly on organized crime because, as we know, in Albania are very rare the cases when we have investigations or court cases over confiscation of assets of politicians or other high officials. So our focus is on organized crime. I will mention here the latest challenges that we have encountered to further investigate. And when we say we, I'm talking in the name of most civil society actors and journalists in Albania. One of the first challenges is that, especially now, due to COVID, for almost 1 year, journalists are not possible to follow any case, any court case in the court of in the court of Tirana. And such cases, such situation make it impossible to follow and to report transparently to the public what is happening in the courts. And as we know, the verdicts of the court are not published, and especially not in time. And in the last 2 years, we have this difficulty with the database of court decisions. And also, the audio recordings of such sessions are not made available also. Beyond the court sessions, we have difficulties that we have encountered in gathering the data from the courts of the country regarding all the court decision about the confiscation of assets. We have sent freedom of information requests to all the courts of Albania in order to develop databases which will be used by journalists to further investigate each of these cases, and to further monitor not only what has happened during the investigation process and the decision, but also through the administration of these assets by the state and their recovery and return. What has happened is that only few courts have replied on time and has gave back the information, while most of the courts have refused to send the verdicts because of data protection. Of course, we appealed all these cases to the commissioner, and just today, just 1 hour ago, we received the first decisions, and we try to push for transparency. Of course, in such regard, there is a lack of clear regulatory framework. I mean, where the public interest over such cases goes beyond the personal data and sensitive data that this court decision includes. Of course, we are not talking about, we are not demanding data regarding the number of the bank accounts or other sensitive data or data related to third parties. But for us, it's very important at least to push the courts to deliver all the data on the values of the assets, on the type of the assets, what Agostino explained before, that are very, very important data to be public, proactively transparent for the public and the media, and not to be pushed through a very long process of freedom of information requests and appeals, etc. As I mentioned, it's not an easy process. We have not yet been able to collect all the data. We are hoping that through this long process of appeals to the commissioner and perhaps through cases to the administrative court to be able to gather all the data, which will enable then a local journalist to look further and to investigate case by case, and not only to raise awareness to the public on the importance, what is the value, and how much this organized crime dictates, let's say, the economy of the local economy and is present in our lives. Just to mention one of the main problems when why we started this research is because the only data available until now in Albania are those released by the police. So we have almost always public information available from the police when they do the first action, let's say, to the first seizing or freezing of assets. But there is never data available what happens in the next steps of the process, what happens from that initial freezing of assets until the confiscation. During a very short analysis that we did a few years ago as journalists, we found out that only 3% of those declarations from the police that are the only public available information, only 3% of those were finalized through a confiscation order. So, and the process, of course, it continues for years, and sometimes, as it was the case for the election fraud in Dibra, sometimes the prosecutor offices just miss the timeline, and so the cases are closed without having any results in the process. I will not take any more time. Thank you so much, because I want to leave time to the discussion panel.
Great. Thank you very much, dear Christina, for your consideration and for pointing out the relevance of transparency and accountability in asset recovery on a really practical examples and challenges. Yeah, just one remark from my heart. You are not alone. Germany is publishing the statistic data on asset recovery only from 2018 on. So that is not your own problem. Now I'm very happy to open the discussion on questions and answers. I think first is Voisava Osmanai. You're welcome, please. I'm not sure I pronounced your name in right manner, so I'm very sorry.
No. Hello, I don't know if you hear me, so I have to talk in English. I am Vojsava Osmanaj. I work as a judge in the Appeal Court of Shkodra, and at the same time, I am a judge of media for all this jurisdiction. I'm hearing with very interest the conference since the beginning, but I was a bit touched from the point of view of Agostino and Cristina, and I heard them with much interest, because since I am being appointed as, sorry for my English, as a judge of media, I have been working on the request of media and other society like NGOs for information about the court decision. And due to the reformation of the legislation, the judge of media now is the person, authority, who takes into consideration this request for information. So based on the principle of transparency. And personally, we have been working a lot on the request of media, of course, and of other NGOs that are asking for information for the decision on sequestration of the assets and on confiscation. I can say that until now we have treated all the requests of media. We have treated them even that the media have asked us decision for 10 years. And based on the situation that the courts are now, in my court, we have been 10 judges, we are only 4, and we are working for 10. And of course that I, beside my work as a judge, have been working on this request. We had a problem with media about this information that Cristina mentioned. We gave them all the decision with all the data, and the only thing that we anonymized, so we didn't give, was the names based on the law for the protection of the personal data, because I, as a judge of media, together with other coordinators, we decided that for the purpose that this NGO and media asked this decision, the names was not important. But what happened? So I want an opinion from Agostino, maybe, and even from Cristina. The media accused us that we are protecting the criminals. So not giving the names means that we are protecting the criminals because we are not giving the data with their names on this decision. And again, we went on deciding on that. Again, we decided that we are not protecting the criminals, and we cannot say criminals until a high court or all the judge procedure is closed. When the judge procedure is closed, that means that these assets are confiscated, then we can give the media even the names of this person, criminal person that has these assets. So this was the point that I wanted to mention. I don't know, I want a view from maybe from Germany. So this was our decision, my decision, and other coordinators of the jurisdiction of Shkodra. But it's not that I have not been thinking on this, that is it right or no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 questions more. I would propose to gather them and then to answer it in complexity. Thank you. So please, Nina Keruti, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Nina Keruti. I work as program manager at Partners Albania for Change and Development. And as Cristina mentioned, Partners Albania since 2016 has implemented one of the pioneer project, not even in Albania, but even in the Western Balkans, which is CAUS project, confiscated asset used for social enterprises. So the reuse of these confiscated assets from organized crime by civil society organizations. And we have been successful in establishing 3 social enterprises in Fier, in Durrës and Saranda, by giving not only the message that what is stolen from the public should be to the public, but even giving the opportunities to social reuse of these confiscated assets from organized crime. And what is an added value that this kind of practice brings in is the fact that these social enterprises employ people who are at risk from organized crime or who are victims of organized crime. So it is a good opportunity, and we saw it as a positive example to bring not only in Albania, as I mentioned, but even in the Western Balkans. As Christina mentioned, bearing the fact that we do not have official data on confiscated assets, we again, in cooperation with the Agency for the Administration of Confiscated, of Sequestered and Confiscated Assets in Albania, have published study by mentioning what are the confiscated assets available that can be used by third parties, by civil society organizations or by other entities that can be reused for their social or economic activity. So in this kind, we have contributed to increase this kind of awareness and to provide data which are very important and are lacking at the moment. And what I would like to hear from Agostino, I really like his presentation. So accountability and transparency is very important. I wanted to know more if there are mechanisms at local level, not ANCAC coalitions, because ANCAC is international coalition, but if there are mechanisms at local level established with the representation of civil society organizations that are working to increase transparency and accountability at local level, at national level. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And now we have the question of Julie. You're welcome, and please also look a bit on the time.
Yeah,
so
thank
the floor
you.
is yours.
Yeah, I'm also from Partners Albania. I'm not going to do any introduction, just a quick remark supporting Christina's concerns regarding transparency, also in line with what Ms. Osmanai raised. I fully realize that, in fact, it's more Tirana Court that is has endorsed for so many years now, keeping the identity of how is it called, people that have, or subjects that have a court case anonymous until the whole cycle is closed. But in the case of confiscated assets, it's a bit more complex because as most of you know, according to the Albanian legislation, these assets during the freezing phase, they are used, administrated by the state agency, the Agency for Management of Confiscated Assets. So as part of that, they are managed by this agency, or they can be given for management even to third parties. Being this also NGOs. In our case, we got only confiscated assets. So assets that have already closed the judgment procedure, so they are returned to the state. Saying that, this is very important also for the third parties, in this case NGOs as well, to know who these properties belong. It's part of the right to information they have, but also it's part of the calculated risk and knowing who they might be dealing with. This is first. Second, is not an experience that we have with the court, but when it comes to the agency, it is totally unacceptable, beside our very really easy cooperation, institutional cooperation with the agency, but the agency, as we speak, doesn't have a website. Forget about having a register of confiscated assets. And in fact, this is also against recommendations for so many years now of the Manival in the reports for Albania. So this is one of the concerns raised, which not only impede the exercising role of the civil society and media in terms of monitoring, but also it has to do with basic concern regarding transparency and risk, how these properties are used. One third final remark from my point has to do with legal legislation. It was, I think it was mentioned also from Agatino, how important it is to make sure that in a way these properties do not go back by using third parties to the former owner. And this is not something, even in the cases where we are taking these properties with a right of use for 5 years for civil society.
Unfortunately, we have a bit time problem.
Yeah, no, that's it. So making sure that this, as I said, these properties do not go back to the owners. Thank you.
Very sorry to have interrupted you, but I think it's really worth to discuss all these questions now with Christina and with Tino. Probably one question to Professor Caramucha. How many time we have? Do we have 5 minutes or do we have probably a bit more?
I'm afraid time is up anyway.
Okay, so that means we have now 5 minutes. And Adita, you wanted also to say some words?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a sentence for Yuli and also for all the participants who are interested in asset management in Albania and in transparency in this area, that we are also supporting through the GIZ project on combating illicit financial flows. We are supporting Asset Management Office not only to create the web page, so as a first step for increasing transparency, but also for the register and stuff like that. So I think that during this year, we will have a better level of transparency regarding management of assets. Thank you.
Wonderful. Dear colleagues, dear panelists, you have 5 minutes for everything.
Christina, okay, yes.
Ladies
yes,
first.
Thank you, Ms. Osmani, for your suggestion. If you are referring to our case, the discussion within the hearing session of the Commission, that it's a closed hearing session between the institution and the person, the organization demanding the data, I don't see it as accusations, and I hope you don't see it also. But regarding the specific case, yes, we still believe that the names of members of organized crimes for which there is a court decision, even in first instance, for the confiscation of assets should be public, because even based on the current law, the public interests prevail from the data protection. So yes, we still believe that. That's why we have sent it to the commissioner with this complaint. For those few courts, we have decided to reply to the request, but anonymize only the names of the persons found guilty in those cases. So yes, I fully agree with Yuli that the even previous instances and steps should provide enough information especially for civil society, but also for journalists to follow up the process, to monitor the process, and perhaps to use those data, even seized or confiscated assets, seized or confiscated one. And especially we have to see the full process and the whole situation. Why? Because as we have mentioned also in the hearing session, the names of the persons are almost always published by the police in the very initial step, which we may have a long debate, is it right or wrong? Also, the court decisions are published in full in KOMBÖTARE, that is the business register. And also, if you go in person to all these assets, you will have all the data out of the published out of the each building that has been confiscated or each other asset. So we believe that those these reasons are enough for us and other, of course, organizations and media organizations to have the data on the court decision over the confiscated assets. But of course, I know that it's a long process and it's a long debate, and each party has its own perceptions, and of course, there is a concern over personal data. I fully agree with that. Thank you.
Should I just step in? Okay, so thank you for your very interesting comments and questions. Yeah, we don't have so much time, and I just go through them quickly. I think that Christina already answered quite sufficiently to the first question about the issue on releasing names. Of course, this is a key issue in many situations, similar situations, because of privacy, confidentiality concerns. I think it's, yeah, as we've seen clearly today, it's very difficult to find the balance between these two needs. Of course, if civil society has all the other information based on what they need the information for concerning the case, they can already work on something, and then it is of course a very good step that courts release everything else. And then the key topic of names, yes, it needs to be seen on the, I am not familiar with the Albanian context, so I cannot really give a comment on if it is right or wrong. I mean, as a civil society organization, we definitely agree that it is needed, and there needs to be efforts as much as possible to publish this data, or at least to share it with the civil society organizations if publication in the media or in the public is not possible. But yeah, it needs to be definitely an effort, a very strong effort. From the other comments and question, I wanted to just quickly go on to the question about mechanisms to establish civil society role to increase transparency and accountability. And yes, we don't have so many examples over the past few years. I just want to mention two of them. One is concerning Kazakhstan. Some of you might have heard of this foundation that was founded in up to 2006, where a foundation organization was founded through the negotiation between involved countries, Switzerland, US, and Kazakhstan, that these assets would be monitored and even managed partially by civil society organizations for education and poverty reduction projects. So this is dealt with at a multilateral level or bilateral level. In another case, we've seen in Nigeria in 2017, the first time, the involvement of civil society, and this was already agreed on at the bilateral level between Switzerland and Nigeria. It was about $300 million that were being restituted to Nigeria in 2017, and there the role of civil society was clearly stated in the framework agreement signed between the two governments, and then it was up to the government to Nigeria in this case to decide exactly how the monitoring should take place. And civil society had a very important role in this. We saw a large network of NGOs in Nigeria being active in monitoring the disbursements. It was in this case a cash transfer program for poverty reduction. So they were going to all throughout the country and checking how the disbursement was taking place. And this was this was officially recognized as from the government. There were a lot of challenges. Indeed, it was not easy, but it was the first time that this happened in a more structured way, and we hope that it can happen in many other countries as well. Of course, when it comes to domestic asset recovery, as it might be the case in Albania, this role needs to be recognized by local authorities already from the start, and also in the most formal way possible through framework agreements, strategy documents, and other kind of commitments that you can then compare to what is actually happened. So it's happening more and more. There are other examples I will not mention now, and I'm very happy to see that NGOs and networks like Partners Albania are already doing this in Albania. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Tino. And now in the end, unfortunately, we have to go to come to the end and close our two great panels. And I want first to thank all the panelists for their excellent discussions, for their excellent contributions and their insights on really, really great and deep topics like actual challenges in anti-money laundering process in Albania, or the vision of cashless society, or the problems of civil society and right to information in asset recovery field. Thank you also from my side for this great opportunity to moderate this panel. You see me in the great confidence that in cooperation we can achieve efforts and successes in this field in combating money laundering and made asset recovery more effective. Johannes, do you want to say some words? No?
Just thank you very much. It was very, very interesting and insightful. And I look forward to the future cooperation. Thank you, dear colleagues.
Thank you, dear Albanian colleagues, also to involving us from Germany. Happy to be here. That's a big honor. And now, 5 minutes later, too late. I have the honor to give the floor and the whole process to Professor Caramucha, and to say goodbye from our English-speaking side.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarmisova, you have been in great leadership show now.
So then we're leaving, huh?
Yeah, we're leaving.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ilir, mund të vazhdosh me prezantimin në panelin në Shqip. Zoti Duanxhi, a dëgjon? Okej, tani do të jetë profesor Caramuço që do vijoj me moderimin, kështu që lidhuni bashkarisht.
Atëherë, zotin Duanxhi, më dëgjon? Dëgjon. Zoti Duanxhi, dëgjon? Hape pak mikrofonin, hape mikrofonin. E ke të mbyllur. Zoti Lirë, më dëgjon? Mikrofoni është i mbyllur. Hape mikrofonin, të lutem. Aty ku është mikrofoni, si logo mund ta shtyj përsipër.
Qetësori jam.
Zoti Duangjiu.
Përshëndetje.
Po.
Më dëgjojmë?
Lutem, unë quhem Ervin Karamuço, jam profesor në Departamentin Penal, Fakulteti Juridik. Deri në orën 14:30 sipas planit që kemi ndarë, unë do të jem moderatori i këtij paneli.
Dakor.
Është një kërkesë nga Duangjiu për të filluar me prezantimin. Ju lutem përmbahuni 10 minutë që është planifikuar për secilin prej jush. Shkurtimisht prezantoni veten, cilët detyrë keni aktualisht ose çfarë profesioni dhe më pas strukturën, një shtjellim të shkurtër dhe konkluzionet e punimit. Ju faleminderit. Fjala për ju.
Faleminderit juve. Atëherë përsa për këtë punimit që unë jam pedagog në Fakultetin e Drejtësisë, quhem Duangjiu, unë doktor i shkencave dhe kryesisht jam pjesë e Departamentit të Drejtësisë Penale në lëndën drejtësisë civile në lëndën e drejtë procedurale civile. Konkretisht punimi im fokusohet kryesisht në pjesën që ka të bëjë me personat e tretë dhe interesat e këtyre personave në kuadër të ligjit të antimafie, pra ligjit 1092 të vitit 2009 dhe interesat dhe mënyrën se si preken interesat e këtyre subjekteve në kuadër të
Po. A mund të vazhdoni apo keni ndonjë problem?
Dëgjohen?
Po, dëgjoni, po.
Ju kërkoj ndjes tani sepse sapo na ikën dritët. Ju kërkoj ndjes. Atëra, përsa përket çështjes trajtuar, normalisht i referohet pikërisht interesave të personave të tretë. Cili ka qenë qëllimi apo arsyeja pse u mor në trajtim kjo çështje. Meqense po shohim aktualisht ka një trend të çështjes në pasuritë që janë vendosur në mënyrë të paligjshme, pra ndërmjet krimit nga krimi organizuar apo korrupsionit, po tentohen që të mos mbahen më në emër apo për llogarit të subjekteve që janë subjekti i këtij ligji, por njëkohësisht as në emër të familjarëve të tyre, meqense familjarët janë subjekte që jo vetëm që janë subjekti i ligjit 1092 të 2009, por njëkohësisht janë edhe subjekte të ekspozuar. Tendenca aktuale, edhe që po shihet goxha sot, është që asetet e vendosura në mënyrë të paligjshme, pra nëpërmjet pjesës së krimit të organizuar apo korrupsionit, po tentohen të vendosen në subjekte private, kryesisht nëpërmjet personave juridik privat, të cilët ushtrojnë aktivitete të ndryshme në biznese të ndryshme. Dhe cili është trendi apo procedura që ndiqet. Procedura që ndiqet është që tentohet të vendosin këto asete të paligjshme në subjekte të cilët kanë një historik të gjatë në aktivitetin apo në biznese. Po kjo nuk do të thotë që edhe vendosin e këtyre aseteve në bizneset të reja, po kryesisht tendenca është që të vendosen në asetet e vjetra, në kompanitë të cilat kanë një historik, kanë vite në tregun e biznesit, dhe cili është qëllimi. Në vetvete që këto pasuri, këto pasuri të paligjshme të pamundësohen apo ti pamundësohen organeve të procedurës, dhe konkretisht pra organeve të prokurorisë, të cilët janë edhe organet që ndjekin edhe çështje që kanë të bëjnë me goditje në aspektin pasuror pra të krimit organizuar dhe të korrupsionit, dhe konkretisht nëpërmjet procesit të sekuestrimit dhe të konfiskimit, dhe pikërisht pra tendenca për të fshehur pranë këtyre subjekteve këto vlera monetare është në rritje. Një nga sektorët aktual që kemi sot është sektori i ndërtimit, për një arsye të qëllimi është sektori i ndërtimit ka dy momente, ka momentin që lidhet pikërisht me një investim që mbulon goxha mirë pjesën e aseteve të investuara, pra po flasim për gjithmonë për asetet paligjshme, dhe njëkohësisht për sa i përket pjesës rikthimit të këtyre vlerave, por jo një rikthim normal, por një rikthim në shumëfishën e saj. Aktualisht ne shohim subjekte private të cilat ose kanë një historik, por që kanë pas një aktivitet modest, po ta shohim në aspektin e menaxhimit të vlerave monetare, dhe në një periudhë shumë të shkurtër kohore, prej 2-3 vitesh, ato arrin të menaxhojnë vlera goxha të konsiderueshme, të arrin të investojnë vlera të cilat normalisht nuk janë marrë as nga bankat apo pranë bankave nëpërmjet kredive, apo nuk janë të justifikuara nëpërmjet burimit të ligjshëm. Pikërisht pra kjo tendencë e këtyre subjekteve që janë subjekt pra i ligjit 1092 të vitit 2009 për të fshehur pasuritë nëpërmjet personave të tretë, të cilët nuk kanë lidhje gjinore, po insistoj te kjo pjesë, sepse aktualisht deri para disa vitesh kryesisht kishte të bënte me një besueshmëri, raport besueshmërie mbi bazën e marrëdhënieve gjinore. Aktualisht ka kaluar ky stat dhe po kalohet në një marrëdhënie jo më gjinore, për arsyet që përmenda pak më përpara të ekspozimit apo të pasjes të qenërit më të ekspozuar të këtyre pra të subjekteve që janë në marrëdhënie gjini, por po kalohet në subjekte të besuara, personat e tretë të cilët normalisht garantojnë menaxhimin, administrimin e këtyre vlerave monetare dhe rikthimin e tyre në formën e ligjshme. Pikërisht pra kjo është një nga problematikat që ky punim trajton dhe njëkohësisht evidenton një sër elementesh që kanë të bëjnë pra me detyrimin e organit procedues dhe konkretisht pra të prokurorisë, e cila të identifikimit të këtyre aseteve pa cënuar interesat e personave të tretë. Duhet marrim në konsiderat që Shqipëria për sa i përket aspektit të fiskalizimit ka një gap, ka një boshllëk goxha të madh në këtë aspekt, pasi deri nga viti 2002 kemi pasur një sistem fiskalizimi goxha nuk dua të them rudimentar, po goxha të një niveli jo të mirë, pavarësisht tendencave përsëri akoma çështja e përdorimit të paras likuide pra jashtë bankave, pra mbajtjes së parave jashtë bankave, apo të mos taksimit apo mos identifikimit të burimeve, të cilat nuk mund të them që janë të ligjshme, pra nuk është se vinë si produkt i aktivitetit kriminal, por është një produkt i një pune të zezë të subjekteve që realizojnë apo të fshehjes të ardhura. Përsëri pra normalisht organet e prokurorisë, organet proceduese duhet të kenë dhe duhet të mbajnë në konsiderat disa parametra të evidentimit se cila pjesë e këtyre pasurive është pasuri e ardhur nga aktiviteti kriminal. Pra, kur flasim pra nga aktiviteti kriminal, flasim për krimin organizuar dhe korrupsionin, dhe cili është një aktivitet dhe ajo pasuri e cila ka ardhur nga një punë normale, por që për shkak të nivelit të ulët të fiskalizimit të veprimeve në kuadër pra të punës dhe të marrëdhënieve tregtare pra të biznesit në Shqipëri, normalisht është e pamundur deri diku që të justifikohen. Edhe pse, për shembull, po të referohemi legislacionit europian, kemi masa më represive, pasi konsiderohet objekt i sekuestros dhe më pas i konfiskimit çdo lloj pasurie, pavarësisht se subjekti mund mos jetë subjekt i procedimit penal. Personat e tretë të cilët nuk arrin të justifikojnë pasuritë e tyre, pikërisht këto pasuri janë objekte, pra është më represiv legjislacioni, mund të referohem legjislacionit amerikan, anglez, po kështu edhe atij europian. Pavarësisht tendencave, faktikisht një nga problematikat që akoma sot del në Europë është pikërisht çështja e respektimit të drejtave të personave të tretë në kuadër të parashikimeve të Konventës Europiane të Drejtë Njeriut. Në këtë kuadër, duke pas në konsiderat që edhe Konventa e Varshavës ka pas pra në lidhje me pastrimin në lidhje me krimin organizuar dhe goditjen e aseteve pasurore të tij, normalisht ka pas problematika, ashtu siç ligji 2004 që kemi pasur ne në lidhje me goditjen e krimit organizuar, ku nuk identifikohej gjykata kompetente, nuk identifikohej ose nuk parashikohej çështja e personave personave të tretë, pavarësisht investimit që bëri gjykata e lartë në vendimin unifikues numër 1 të vitit 2007 në lidhje me pikërisht me rregullimin deri diku të identifikimit të gjykatës kompetente etj, përsëri ai ligj pati problemi. E njëjta gjë po ndodh sot në Europë. Fatikisht, pavarësisht direktivës 42 të vitit 2014 Këshillit të Europës në lidhje për një riorganizim, një unifikim të praktikave, përsëri ka një problematika. Dhe pikërisht është Gjykata Evropiane e Drejtë Njerëzit, e cila me praktikën e saj, mund të përmend rastin e De Tomazos, të cilat synojnë të identifikojnë dhe në shumë raste kanë gjetur shkelje të organeve proceduese pikërisht duke evidentuar problematika në lidhje me kriteret e aplikuara dhe metodologjinë e përdorur për të identifikuar këto pasuri të palujshme. Pikërisht pra, këto lloj veprimesh shkojnë deri në atë pikë sa cënojnë të drejtat e subjekteve përkatëse, gjithmonë në kuadër të parashikimeve ligjore, të cilat në një farë mënyre. Po. Atëherë, okay. Pikërisht pra kjo është kërkesa bazë në të cilën synohet pra të arrihet apo punimi synon të evidentojë është që identifikimi i kritereve sa më të qarta për krijimin e një dyshimi të arsyeshëm që justifikon më pas proceset e sekuestrimit dhe të konfiskimit, sidomos në kuadër të interesave të personave të tretë. Besoj se më shpejt se kaq. Faleminderit.
Falenderoj për prezantimin. Atëherë sipas radhës tani e ka kohën zonja Jonida Gura dhe zoti Qetësim Gura në lidhje me temën The Sophisticated Organizational Evaluation of Money Laundering and the International Legal Measure to Stop Them. Dikush nga dy autorët është i pranishëm? Mund të hapësh mikrofonin, të lutem?
Qetësor Gura.
Po, gëzojmë. Urdhoni, zoti Qetësor.
Unë jam Qetësor Gura, jam pedagog në Akademinë e Hetimit të Krimit. Kam një eksperiencë goxha të madhe me hetimin e krimit, veçanërisht me krimin ekonomik, dhe kam qenë dhe shef i sektorit të aseteve kriminale. E kam bërë me Jonida Gurën, një studente ekselente e Fakultetit Juridik Marin Barleti dhe ekselente e Akademisë së Policisë. Aktualisht punon në njësia E, ose siç quhen OFL-ja, por tani është drejtoria e hetimit të krimit. Kemi bërë atë pjesë duke e parë me syrin e policit se çfarë kemi hasur ne dhe çfarë mendimesh japim me qëllim që të marrim dhe të zbatohet standardi më i mirë. Prandaj dhe tema është evolucioni sofistikuar organizativ i pastrimit parave dhe masat ndërkombëtare ligjore, të cilat përpiqen të jenë në lartësinë e dur për të kuptuar dhe ndaluar ato. Ajo që më ka bërë përshtypje, ne shpeshherë kemi bërë ligjet në dukje të mira, pastaj kujtohemi që ligji ka mangësi. Po marr ligjin 10.952, ku kam punuar edhe vetë, e bëm ligjin dhe pastaj u kujtuam, bëm vërejtje se nuk kuptonim fjalën indicie. Pastaj u kujtuam që e kemi zgjeruar shumë rrethin e personave të cilët i nënshtrojnë hetimit pasuror. Pastaj u kujtuam që edhe pse kemi marrë modelin italian, në rast se italianët kapen në Shqipëri me trafik droge, shqiptarët i nënshtrojnë hetimit pasuror, italianët jo. Kjo beri për atë që ne së bashku me Jonida Gurën të punojmë për të sjellë cilat janë modelet më të mira dhe si ka ecur evolucioni i ligjit pastrimit parave sipas praktikës ndiq para. Nuk marr përsipër të lexoj atë që kam shkruar, nuk dua që t'ju bezdis sepse koha është shumë e çmuar. Kam bërë një historik të ligjeve veçanërisht të Britanisë së Madhe, të Australisë dhe Kanadas. Jam ndaluar tek modeli italian i cili mendohet që është modeli më i mirë në sekuestrimin dhe konfiskimin e pasurive. Rekomandimet që ka konstatuar Bashkimi Evropian dhe çfarë i sugjeron Shqipërisë, të cilat janë të materializuara jashtëzakonisht shumë mirë në punimin që kemi bërë. Ajo që mua më ka bërë më tepër përshtypje është edhe në punim, edhe pse ne po shikojmë një numër të madh sekuestrimesh, kur vjen puna në konfiskimi i pasurive, në djenin time sasia është një shifrore. Kjo tregon edhe një herë që ne duhet të përsosim legjislacionin dhe të gjejmë mënyrat më të mira për të vënë përpara ndoshta drejtësisë jo, por hetimi pasuror vazhdon. 3 janë grupimet me të cilat vepron ligji antimafia, që janë objekti i këtij ligji. Grupi i parë janë të gjithë të dënuarit për atë grup veprash penale. Besoj se keni vënë re që kohët e fundit u kujtuan, sepse rruga që të vinin dokumentacioni nga Europa, të vinte në Ministri Drejtësisë, zyra e marrëdhënieve me jashtë në prokurori i përgjithshëm, i cili lejonte hetimin, bllokoshin të gjitha në Ministri Drejtësisë. Po të shikoni grupin e dytë që merreshin me veprimtarinë kriminale objekti i ligjit, besoj se të gjitha kapjet në flagrant ishin njerëz, po them pa personalitet, por që nuk figuronin në asnjë pasuri. Grupi i tre, që kishte të bëjë për këtë grup veprash penale dhe që është objekti punës së policisë shtetit, po të shikoni, po pale për hetim edhe konfiskim të pasurive. Të gjitha këto i kam hedhur në punim, nuk duhet ju hajkoj, ju falenderoj shumë. Kaq profesor Ervini. Profesor Caramuço. Profesor Ervini.
Ju falenderoj, mund ta mbyllni mikrofonin?
Po.
Atëherë radhën e ka për të prezantuar, janë 2 autorë normalisht, zoti Nako dhe zonja Raku, për temën anglisht, sepse kështu i kam në program, megjithatë mund t'i përkthejmë, varet do të jetë konsistenca lidhje me i përuar, money laundering in informal Albania.
Përshëndetje.
Po, okay. Një prezantim të shkurtër tuaj dhe të bashkëautores, strukturën e punimit, çfarë keni shtjelluar dhe konkluzionet brenda një 10 minutësh mundësisht, ha? Faleminderit.
Vetëm ka një çështje, ne kemi përgatitur prezantimin në anglisht, mund të vazhdojmë në anglisht apo ta përkthejmë duke shkuar?
Derisa keni bërë në anglisht, normalisht mund të prezantoni edhe anglisht ose shqip, varet nga ju. Ideja është edhe e shqipëruar, në mendjet tuaja kam përshtypjen, se në letra e kuptoj që do jetë anglisht.
E kuptoj. Atëherë po vazhdojmë
në vijat të përgjithshme, ta shpjegoni edhe shqip. Se janë disa të pranishëm normalisht nuk e kanë edhe njohuritë e mjaftueshme, që të lutem. Faleminderit.
Okej. Përshëndetje të gjithëve, unë quhem Albanako, jam një student doktoraturë në Universitetin e Poka për shkenca politike dhe mbështetje kombëtare. Ka përfunduar studimet në Universitetin e Tiranës për shkenca penale, së bashku me Olsa Raku, e cila është një studente në masterin ekzekutiv për kriminologji. Kemi përgatitur një paper ose një shkrim për konferencën e organizuar sot, që është pastrimi i parave në Shqipërinë informale. Ne kemi filluar duke qenë se synimi është për të parë se si luftohet, si thua, ose çfarë është pastrimi i parave, dhe më pas se si duhet të organizohet si proces për të arritur si thua mekanizma efikas që të realizojnë një sistem, si thua, mbrojtje kundër pastrimit parave, është rëndësishme që ne të kuptojmë çfarë është pastrimi parave. Edhe ajo që kemi ne gjetur është që, si thua, si term për herë të parë në arritje ndërkombëtare, pastrimi parave është le të themi prokufizuar në konventën e vitit 1998 të Vienës nga Kombët e Bashkuara, ku në artikullin ose në nenin 3 paragrafi 1 cilësohet që pastrimi parave është transferimi i një prone ose një pasurie e cila vjen nga një keqbërje ose nga një veprim i kundërlishëm me qëllimin për t'i fshehur identitetin nga se është krijuar kjo pasuri dhe për t'a rifutur edhe një herë në sistemin legal duke fshehur këtë trace ose këtë burim të ardhurash. Në paperin ton ose në punimin ton ne ngrem pyetjen se si ndikon pastrimi parave ose procesi të quajtur pastrimi parave në një ekonomi e cila është bazuar kryesisht në cash, dhe duke patur parasysh që fakebooku i CIA thotë që 2/3 ekonomisë shqiptare janë informale, dhe se si konkuron pastrimi parave me remitancat, të cilat janë, si thua, një burim të ardhurash që propagandohen, le të themi, nga Fondi Ndërkombëtar Monetar dhe nga Banka Shqiptare, si një proces i cili ndihmon ekonominë shqiptare, ndërkohë duke ndodhur, si thua, paralelisht me procesin e pastrimit parave, pra parave që vijnë nga jashtë Shqipërisë, duke qenë duhet të themi si specifika në rastin shqiptar është që shumica e parave të pista të cilat tentohet të pastrohen vijnë nga jashtë, janë produkt i veprave penale si kanabisi, trafikimi lëndë narkotike, trafikimi prostitucionit, abuzimeve të mitur, e të tjerë. Ne themi që duke qenë se Shqipëria është në një fazë tranzicionit të vazhdueshëm, shumë pak progres është bërë në këtë fushë, duke qenë se të gjitha iniciativat të cilat janë, si thua, propaganduar ose iniciativat ligjore që kanë ndodhur në Shqipëri, gjithmonë përballen me korrupsionin, përballen me krimin e organizuar dhe me institucionet e dobta, të cilat për shkak të ndryshimeve të vazhdueshme e kanë të pamundur për të konsoliduar një praktikë të qëndrueshme për të arritur për ta evidentuar këtë si proces, për ta kufizuar, për të gjetur antidotin e duhur dhe për të implementuar një zgjidhje të caktuar në Shqipëri. Nga teoria e pastrimit të parave në botë, zakonisht bëhet në 3 faza, që është vendosja e parave, shtresëzimi në ekonominë dhe integrimi duke bërë të duket si një burim i lishëm. Në vende si Shqipëria, ku vetëm 43% e popullsisë adulte kanë një llogari bankare, por duke marrë parasysh që edhe bizneset kanë ose personat juridik kanë llogaritë e tyre bankare, pra në total në Shqipëri janë diku te 1.9 milion llogari bankare dhe forca punëtore është diku te 900.000 të punësuar, arrit konkluzionin që pjesa më e madhe e popullsisë operon në tregun ekonomik nëpërmjet parash. Ajo çka është, si thua, karakteristik për rastin e Shqipërisë është që të gjitha ato para të pista nuk bëhet, si thua, futja këtyre parave të pista në vendin e origjinës ku janë krijuar këto para, por ndodh fenomeni që këto para sillen fizikisht në Republikën e Shqipërisë në mënyrë që ose që njerëzit i përdorin, si thua, këto pasuri të sjella në mënyrë të krijuara në mënyrë të palishme, ose të integrojnë në ekonominë informale që ka Shqipëria nëpërmjet mbi pagesave që ndodhin në bizneset e caktuara, në biznesin e import-eksportit dhe duke dhe në rastin më klasik që ne kemi në biznesin e real estate, pra në ndërtimin me bumin ekonomik të ndërtimeve që po ndodh ristadi në Shqipëri. Sipas teorisë, ajo që ka ndodhur më së shumti është smurfing. Smurfing është, si thua, është një term i cili përdoret që bëhet ndarja e burimeve të palishme në mënyrë që të integrohen në shoqëri ose në një biznes të lishëm. Ajo që vije re në këtë rastin tonë është që përdoren 2 mënyra, ose përdoret në sasi të mëdha, pra siç është rasti i Toyota Yaris ku në bagazh një makine u gjetën 2.3 milion euro, ose siç rasti i Kakavis ku në brenda pajisjeve elektronike si lavatrice, televizore u gjetën 1.5 milion euro, ose është rasti ku përdoren mekanizëm gjysmë të lishëm, pra që do thotë një udhëtar ka të drejtë të mbajë deri në 10.000 euro cash, duke dhe deklaruar, dhe krijohet një sër networkesh të cilat vijnë nga Gjermania, nga Anglia, nga Franca, Spanja dhe Italia, ku ka njerëz që udhtojnë në mënyrë të shpeshtë, sjellin këto burime të ardhurash duke copëzuar, si thua, procesin e transferimit të fondeve. Ajo që ka ndodh në Shqipëri më pas, sipas Satërit, Banerjee edhe Krashenkowski, ndodh që në vende të tilla ku informaliteti është shumë i madh, ka mundësi të krijohen disa struktura ekonomike të cilat quhen biznese rafti ose shelf companies. Çfarë janë shelf companies? Shelf companies janë në rastin konkret janë kompani të cilat krijohen nga persona të cilët janë tërësisht të lishëm, që operojnë në mënyrë normale për vite me radhë, duke krijuar një strukturë ekonomike ligjore dhe në një moment të caktuar nëpërmjet mbifaturimit, nëpërmjet transaksioneve të dyshimta, arrin të krijojnë ose të integrojnë paratë e pista në sistemin ekonomik. Ajo që ka vjetër në Shqipëri është që nëpërmjet 1000 lekëve të vjetra, duke shkuar te qendra kombëtare e biznesit, duke përdorur një identitet ndoshta edhe të rem, duke deklaruar një adresë e cila ndonjëherë mund të jetë e rem, duke qenë se asnjë institucion shtetëror, QKB-ja, tatimet dhe gjitha institucionet tjera ekonomike nuk kanë tagrin ose kompetencë ligjore për të verifikuar se ku ky biznes ushtron veritarinë e tij ekonomike dhe si ushtron, mjafton që nga pikpamja e bilanceve të jetë në rregull dhe operativ, ndodh që krijohen një shumësi biznesesh të tilla, të cilat nxisin në ekonominë shqiptare si thua paratë e pista. Faza finale e pastrimit të parave është integrimi, të cilat futen në këtë sistem ekonomik, duke fshirur si thua burimet dhe riinvestimi në burime të lishme për të zhvilluar si thua pasurinë ose për të rizhvilluar. Rasti më i famshëm botëror është rasti i Antarit, që ishte një kompani e cila shiste pajisje elektronike dhe nëpërmjet blerjeve që bëheshin me kesh, ajo rriste si thua fitimin me qëllim që të garantonte nëpërmjet bursave investime të mëdha për shkak të biznesit të tyre. Por ajo që është interesante nga pikpamja historike që kur flitet për pastrimin e parave, nuk është diçka e re. Praktikisht njëjtat metode janë përdorur që në vitin 1932 në Amerikë, ku janë përdorur banka të huaja jashtë vendit për të futur paratë e pista, për të transferuar në paraqe fiskale dhe nëpërmjet paraqeve fiskale për të reintegruar edhe një herë në ekonominë e lishme. Ajo që ne ngrem si pikpyetje është cili është efekti që ka pastrimi i parave në një shoqëri. Sipas McDonald and Novis, pastrimi i parave në një mënyrë të drejtë për drejtë sulmon sektorin privat të biznesit, pra pjesën e shëndetshme të biznesit, sulmon tregjet financiare, ndikon në zbehjen e kontrollit financiar, duke qenë se paratë e pista janë një mekanizëm efikas për të ndikuar në korrupsion në Shqipëri. Dhe sipas një studimi të Bankës Botërore, korrupsioni në Shqipëri ndodhte duke filluar nga 10 euro deri në shifra deri në 100.000 euro. Do thotë sasia e keshit të cilët qarkullon ndikon drejt për drejt në ekonomi. Gjithashtu, stabiliteti ekonomik është i cënueshëm, duke qenë se ne vërem shpesh fluktuacionin që ka euro, që ka valuta e huaj dhe të tjera monedha të cilat ndërveprojnë në Shqipëri. Gjithashtu ndikon ka kosto të mëdha sociale, sepse nëpërmjet këtyre parave të pista, të cilat ndërfuten në shoqëri, duke i trazuar pak me remitanca, ne shikojmë që njerëz të caktuar kanë një bum ekonomik në zona të caktuar, duke ndryshuar strukturën sociale të vendit, strukturën sociale urbanistike dhe duke krijuar pasoja të mëdha dhe përmbyll. Në Shqipëri, sipas drejtorisë që merret me pastrimin e parave, ka 4 mënyra që bëhet pastrimi i parave nëpërmjet transfertave nga shtetet e tyre duke përdorur funksione si MoneyGram, Western Union të tjera, transferta të dyshimta nëpërmjet ekonomive të cilat janë fake, pra shelf companies ose shell companies që vijnë nga jashtë. Kemi transferta të cilat vijnë nga vende me risk të lartë, siç janë vendet e lindjes mesme, të cilat krijon si burime të lishme aty, futen në një sistem bankar, kalojnë në 2-3 shtete dhe vijnë përsëri në Shqipëri. Rasti më flagrant që ne kemi në Shqipëri për momentin, për mendimin tim, është rasti i kompanive call center, të cilat janë të futura në industrinë e forex, të cilat duke përdorur si thua këto paraqe fiskale si në Kipro, në Panama dhe në vende të tjera, duke përdorur e-banking, pra krijimin e llogarive bankare, të cilat janë elektronike, bëjnë lëvizjen e transaksionit në brenda 1 ore në 15 banka të ndryshme në 15 vende të Bashkimit Evropian, duke e bërë jo të pamundur, por të vështirë nga pikpamja logjistike për të bërë traced ose për të gjetur se nga kanë ardhur origjinën këtyre parave dhe ku shkojnë në fund të ditës. Pyetja që ne ngrem në këtë çështje është që